This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. Today's episode features a conversation with the good folks from ROAR, Rainbow Organizing and Response. But before we begin, I wanted to spend a few minutes on an excerpt from the remarks our current president made recently to a group of GOP legislators. This clip made the rounds of the late-night comedy shows, not so much for its content as for the buffoonish pantomime he performed while speaking. The headline of almost all the news and entertainment outlets that featured this performance was the same: Trump mocks transgender athletes. But listen more carefully. The overall message, yes, is that trans women have no business in women's sports, but his attempts at comedy, at derision, are aimed squarely at the cisgender women athletes. Take a listen.
But no, the girl gets up. And you see, I want to be more, but I have somebody watching. I want to be more effusive. I want to really, But she gets it, and drops the thing, walks off the stage crying. Her mother's crying, her father's crying. Guy gets up. He said, "Have you lifted before?" A little bit. And he walks up, he could have gone ding, 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 ding. I think it was 112 pounds, right? It's crazy. Or the beautiful boxer. They have boxing now. And that they have a young gentleman who transitioned. He was a very good boxer, but he wanted to be a woman, which is, to each his own. Because I want to be very liberal when it comes to these subjects. I'm trying to get that vote. It's not an easy vote to get. It's very tough for me to get it. But he transitioned, and he transitioned, and the girl was a champion boxer from Italy, remember? She got up, first round. He hit her, boom, with a left. A left, for those, everybody here knows about, but a left, Lisa knows better than anybody, but a left is defense. He goes, boom. She's like, oh my, she walked to the corner, remember? She didn't go down, but she did everything else. But she said, I've never been hit like that before. I don't want to go out again. You can do it. You can do it. Bang. She walked off. She said, he happened to win the gold medal, that young woman.
The cis women are too frail to be weightlifters. The poor cis woman boxer is in tears because she's never faced a serious opponent before. Look, we all know that this president has cheered on the Heritage Foundation and the religious right as they enact the anti-trans agenda that they put into Project 2025. The nuance here, though, is different. This is a wealthy, powerful white guy putting women in their place. It's the same mindset of a guy who was talking about pussy grabbing back in 2016. Before we move on, a bit of fact-checking, which always seems to be necessary when this man speaks. The weightlifter he's referencing is New Zealand's Laurel Hubbard, a trans woman who competed at the Tokyo Olympics in 2020. In fact, Hubbard was the first openly trans woman to compete in the Olympics. Both the IOC and the International Weightlifting Federation cleared Hubbard to compete. Trans women have to show T levels of less than 10 nanomoles, no, don't ask me what a nanomole is, per liter for a 12-month period before the competition. Hubbard passed. See, the IOC has very clear guidelines on trans women athletes, has since 2015. So did the NCAA before they caved and changed their policies under pressure from this administration. According to the rules of the game, set by the professionals in sport, Hubbard was 100% legit. Two other points worth mentioning. Hubbard set a record in 2017 of 113 kilograms, not pounds. 113 kilograms is 249 pounds, which, by the way, is what the president weighed during his first term. No joke. Also, in Tokyo, Hubbard DNF'd. She failed 3 times to snatch the weight correctly, and she finished last in her group. Hardly the powerhouse that the president suggests. The boxer is Algerian Iman Khalif, who won gold at the Paris Olympics in 2024. Khalif is a cisgender woman. She is not trans. And to the best of anyone's knowledge, she is not intersex. The IOC cleared her to compete. In 2023, Khalif was disqualified by the International Boxing Association on the basis of her allegedly failing some nebulously defined gender test. Problem is, the IBA isn't a legitimate source. They've been decertified, and they are not recognized by the IOC. I'll link to the match that the president mimes here. It's brief because Khalif's Italian opponent, Carini, clearly throws the match to make a point. This is unfair. She takes a long view that complaining about trans women, which, again, Khalif is not, will bring her more attention than earning the victory in the ring. Watch the fight. It is the furthest thing from a Rocky movie you can imagine. The Italian throws a few jabs. Khalif has her outmatched in terms of reach, and at no point is the Italian either winded or bloodied. She simply quits in the opening round. And again, if you're inclined to believe that trans women boxers, which Khalif is not, are some kind of juggernauts, watch the clip of slugger Ann Wolfe dropping her on her ass. Khalif is an elite athlete, not some kind of mutant superhero, which of course didn't stop the president or other ill-informed voices from condemning her.
I don't know why they don't support me, because on almost every episode for 103 episodes, I have had a cup of Cumberland Farms coffee in my hand.
Seems like you should get sponsorship or something.
You would think. So how's everybody doing this morning?
I feel like the how's everyone doing question is such a hard one to answer these days, right? Because it's like, this morning, okay, as long as I don't look at the news or think about the people I love and care about, or, notice too much about what's going on around me, and then we have to tune into the realities that are hard. But I always say, and AT always encourages me to put this out in front, that action is an antidote to fear. I think you'd have to be asleep to not be feeling some fear and some rage and some sadness and some upset about what's going on in the world right now. And for me, I turn to action as a remedy for that. When I'm doing something, I feel better.
I'm doing good. I had a glimmer of hope of the election day a couple days ago. So to see the folks that were voted and elected to office, that felt good, and that felt like our work. Everyone's work is paying off. Some signs of hope, and we have to keep doing what we're doing. And I love Allie's. That is her motto, or one of their mottos is "Action is the antidote to fear." I put it on little when we're at certain actions, or I'm at certain actions. That is the card I hold.
So ROAR, which stands for Rainbow Organizing and Response, is grassroots organizing. It's a bunch of people who have gotten together and decided that we want to support LGBTQIA plus and BIPOC events by shielding people from hate at those events, but also by bringing joy and love and a sense of celebration and welcoming to those events. So we like to say that we are there in case there's hate, but we're not there for the hate. We're there for the community. We're there for the event. And so what we do is, when we're invited, we show up at things like Pride or Drag Story Hour or political rallies or different events where, standouts, anything where people are, organizing and wanting marginalized people to be able to show up in community with one another. We believe that visibility is important and community building is essential for our survival. And when those spaces are threatened, or when people feel unsure entering those spaces, it has a real and lasting impact on people, right? So our work is to make it easier to organize those events and make it feel good to attend those events and make those events unwelcoming for hate and spaces of love and care and celebration. And so we have spent the last few years, we're coming up on 3 years, around this March, I guess. Going to all kinds of events all over Western Mass. So we're in Hampshire County, Franklin County, Hampden County, Berkshire County. Sometimes we're out as far as Worcester, and we are just having an incredible time building community, both within our organization and within the larger community. What am I leaving out, AT, about what we do?
No, I think you said it perfectly. At each one of these events, I mean, we hear feedback of how it just, I don't know. I think people notice the rainbows, notice it brings smiles. It just brings a comfort to folks and the organizers. You know, we hear great feedback from them all the time. And the fact that it's grassroots, that means a lot to all of us.
What does that look like in the moment? So if I'm at a pride event or if I'm at a rally, and there are voices of hate, let's say, that have inserted themselves into the event, what does that look like when you're there? You say you're there to counter that or oppose that. How does that work?
Yeah. That's a great question. Our goal is that you don't even have to know they're there. Like, it's a great day if you have no idea that they're there.
I would love a day where I don't feel hated. That
right?
would be wonderful,
Right?
Allie.
That would be great. It's the whole goal. We literally create barriers with our rainbow umbrellas. So we will stand. Sometimes another thing I like to say about our work is that we hold the line between love and hate. So often you will see a line of rainbow umbrellas in front of some nasty signs or protesters or something like that. And we do everything in our power to keep the focus on us and not them. So you'll see us with fun, colorful clothes. Sometimes we're wearing like sequined kitty ears or, rainbow boas or anything. I always tell volunteers, like, bring out those like fairy wings from Halloween that you miss all the rest of the year. Wear those. We are a spectacle. Like, we are the colorful, fun, distracting thing that we want people looking at instead of whatever's behind us. So we will use visual things like that to cue people to pay attention to us and not the hate. We will use audio if we need to. I wear a speaker or somebody wears a speaker at events, and we can blast music if we need to. We don't like to overwhelm people or compete with the audio that the event is having, but in certain situations, like if alt-right likes to use live streaming as a scare tactic. So if it seems like they're doing that, we will use some strategies we have with audio around that to make that more difficult for them. Sometimes
they're recording in the moment, hoping that someone will do something inappropriate or will react out of the frustration that their hatred is causing.
Yep.
And then put that out there, you're saying?
I think it's more, well, I don't know. I think it's more of an intimidation factor that they are recording us. That was my take when we were recorded in Eastern Mass this year.
They want parents to think that these are places not to bring children, like Drag Story Hour. So recording somebody's child is intimidating. Nobody wants their kid up on alt-right media. And they are often in some environments, they will try to like get a reaction out of you and then see if they can catch that and put it out of context to show that, we reacted to them in some way or another. So we try to discourage that and we try to tune it out. And if we don't want to blast music, sometimes we'll do things like we'll chant a counter message. Like at Drag Story Hour, we've had times where, people are saying terrible things for kids to hear. And we start a chant of, we love books, we love books, we love books. So now
that is so controversial.
Right?
Books, you're willing to commit your organization to saying you are pro-book?
We are pro-book, Claire. We really are. It's revolutionary and surprisingly upsetting to some of the people who come to boycott, or to try to protest Drag Story Hour. But yeah, that's exactly it, right? It's like, it's so ridiculous. But really it's ridiculous that we need to be out doing this at all. So we just sort of embrace that and we're like, yeah, we'll chant, we love books, we love rainbows. We keep it positive, we keep it about joy, and we center the joy, and we Your experience as somebody walking up to Drag Story Hour or to a Pride event should be to see this really colorful welcome of people of all genders and ages and identities saying, we're so glad you came, and this event is going to feel great to attend. And if there is anything behind us, our hope is that you see or hear as little of it as possible.
And behind you is an important prepositional phrase there, because you had explained to me that when you put yourselves between the hate speech and the participants in the event, you are facing us, yes, rather than the disruptors.
Yeah. A principle of our work is non-engagement. We don't engage with the hate. We want to make it invisible. So at some events where, like, I might work a different event outside of Roar where I'm a peacekeeper or a marshal, and I might engage and try to, de-escalate. Our way of de-escalating with Roar is to make them invisible by not paying attention to them. So we are forward facing with our community. I'm not going to turn my back on you at Pride so that I can talk to the person who tried to bring hate, right? I will put them behind me if I need to. And as you've seen at Holyoke Pride, sometimes it's more complicated than that. Sometimes we have to sort of bubble somebody who's causing problems, or offer an escort bubble to a drag performer or to a family so that they can move through people who are trying to intimidate them or create fear. But our focus is always going to be on the event and the community. And we have found that, the best way to make them invisible is not to pay attention to them. As soon as, again, we do all this stuff to be colorful and attention grabbing and all of that stuff. So people are now paying attention to us. And if we're paying attention to them, then they're like, oh, what's going on over there?
Yeah, right.
But if we're kind of like, yeah, what's behind us doesn't matter. Like, that's not what we're here for.
Yeah, I think Claire was a witness to Holyoke Pride.
I was.
We had an individual passing out some propaganda pamphlets, and I think the comment was all people saw was a moving rainbow, that was exactly what we want them to see. Like, they didn't see the person handing out those hateful that hateful stuff. So there was more to that story, but I think when it comes down to it, it was exactly how Allie trained us, and they do a good job at having us prepared for lots of different scenarios that can happen. And that was the first time, I believe, that we had that moving rainbow, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, it was. And it was very effective. I want to come back to the idea of training and AT, you feeling that you're prepared in any such circumstance like that. But the incident at Holyoke Pride was an interesting balance for me as I was watching, in that, Allie, what you were just describing is sort of this nationwide, very organized alt-right effort to disrupt events, where there's a game book, there's a playbook rather, and there's, they know what they're doing. This guy in Holyoke seemed to be genuinely befuddled by the fact that he wasn't really welcome there. And it wasn't a matter of, he clearly wasn't a professional disruptor. He was somebody who had his own religious beliefs and was there to just sort of ease his conscience by handing out this literature. And you guys, I watched you so effectively cut him off from the proceedings, move him over to the police, who fortunately were supportive to the degree they could be.
It's interesting. It's so fascinating that's like, I always wonder how it's perceived within the public. It was actually a little different than that, in that so there's two things I want to say. First, you're absolutely right. There's like three different kinds of hate that we see, if we had to sort of boil it down into three categories. And one is the like organized hate group that you're talking about, when, a MAGA group or a Patriot Front group or something like that is at an event. And that's the kind we see least often. And then there's kind of like just a handful of people who want to disrupt or want to come and interject hate. They didn't organize with a group. They're not part of a movement, but they have come to disrupt. And sometimes that can even be in the moment. Like, people are just walking down the street. They see the event, they react to it. And that can be a handful of people, a couple people, one person. That's another kind. And then this kind that we saw quite a bit this last season is the sort of religious proselytizing, targeted, showing up at LGBTQIA plus events in particular. And that's something that seems to be more and more common. Holyoke wasn't actually the first place we dealt with that this season. What happened at Holyoke was interesting because, yes, this guy was, trying to hand out religious materials, but he was very specifically targeting people in drag. He was targeting people around the stage. And so I think he did know what he was doing. I think he was surprised at our response. And what's fascinating, and the big difference that I wanted to point out, is that we did not lead him to the police. He led us to the police. We don't, initiate with the police because some of the people who volunteer with us are less safe when we do, right? So we are, when we're bubbling somebody like that, we're not restricting their movement and we're not guiding their movement, because if we do that, then we are kind of, then we're the problem, right? We don't get to decide where somebody else puts their body. We're following them, but we're just creating a shield, kind of a moving shield between them and the community. So one of us might be out in front letting people know, like, you don't need to take what he's handing out, like just letting people know. Because as we all know on this call, like, queer and trans people have a very complicated relationship with organized religion, and it can often be an instrument of shame or judgment or hate. And so what was interesting at that event was that he was confused about our response, or he was surprised by our response. He felt entitled to deliver his materials to the people at the stage, and he became really angry. And then he brought us to the police. And when we got to the police tent, and again, we don't engage with him, so we're not going to have a conversation with him about it. We're just going to quietly shield people from what he's trying to do. And when we got to the police tent, we had to have a conversation with the police about why we were doing what we were doing. And that resulted in them actually, handling it quite well in that situation, letting him know that it wasn't helpful and that we weren't going to stop. We were within our rights to do what we were doing, and that we would continue doing it for as long as he continued trying to spread his message to people there. So yeah, it is what people saw was a rainbow bubble, but it is always up to the person where they put themselves, and we go with them.
That day my assignment was, call it a roamer, just walk around and be a presence. And so I came upon this happening, and right away when I saw Allie's face, I was like, all right, something is happening here. So to see it a little bit like you did, Claire, like in the beginning, a little bit from a distance and putting it together and joining in, but they already had it under control. And it made me feel just like, wow, this is what we are supposed to be doing. This felt so great to be a part of it, but yet see it from, like your side, and knowing that it was so under control. I was trying to document, actually, and for different reasons.
This episode of Transqat is brought to you by Goodspeed Musicals. Goodspeed is a non-profit theater known around the world for producing high-quality new and classic musicals. Overlooking the banks of the Connecticut River in East Haddam, the Goodspeed is one of the most scenic destinations in the state. Also, the Goodspeed has announced its 2026 season lineup. It opens with Jesus Christ Superstar in April, followed by Crazy for You, Gershwin and Tap Dancing, The Snow Goose, a world premiere, and Annie, which will celebrate its 50th anniversary of debuting on the Goodspeed stage. Learn more at goodspeed.org.
And to hear Allie's interaction with the police was, I wish I had that on video, but when we were led to the police tent, interaction with them can go either way, but Allie's calm way they present things, and there was no defensive. It was just a matter of fact, and right away there was no other way that they could deal with the situation the way that it was presented to them. So
right.
It was
I've
great.
Seen at a number of Pride events similar situations without groups like Roar, but the police are in this very delicate position of people have freedom of speech,
Mhm.
but this is an event for a specific purpose, and so maybe your dissenting speech needs to happen over here as opposed to at the stage. So I had that same thought because I was pretty close to the police tent as well, and I couldn't read the officer either. I didn't know if he was going to just sort of dismiss your concerns or if he was going to work with you. And I was very gratified to see that it was the latter. Yeah.
So much of it is like educating the community, right? And that is an example where, the police's initial response was like, these are just religious materials. Like these are, like what we were saying, like these are just religious materials. And as AT pointed out, like that doesn't mean we need to get into a screaming argument about whether they're religious materials. I just calmly explained, this is how our community experiences those materials. And this is a day that we've set up to celebrate who we are. And those materials are having an impact. They're he knows that those materials might have an impact, and they are having an impact. And so in that way, it's sort of like letting the police know, like, yes, we know they're religious materials. Here's how we're experiencing them, and here's how we're prepared to continue to handle that. And then with the community, it can be a really overwhelming moment when suddenly, like, you're at this event that's supposed to be about pride, and now somebody's handing you something that, at some of these events, the things they hand out are like the sins of pride or things like that. So it's like, that's not going to feel good. And not everybody knows how to handle that in the moment. So sometimes it helps just to have a calm presence there to say, essentially, this person is inviting you into a conversation you don't have to participate in, right? Like they have every right to invite you into a conversation. However, we also can regulate one another and help people recognize, like, you don't need to participate in this conversation. You don't need what he's offering you in this moment. And often we have people express a lot of gratitude for that, because in the moment where all of a sudden this guy's just trying to hand them something, they don't know what it is, they don't know how it's going to feel. Just to have a calm presence saying, you don't need that, gives them the out that they might need.
We in this society have sort of been conditioned to not say nothing.
Yep.
Like, if you're walking out of, let's say Cumberland Farms, and somebody comes
Sorry about that.
Yeah, somebody comes up to you and asks for spare change, we've been conditioned to understand that if I just say nothing and walk away from that person, that's kind of rude. Some kind of a response. I'm sorry, I can't help you today, or yes, here's $1. Or let me buy you a cup of coffee. But some kind of a response is polite society. And so even in that situation where you know that this guy is going to hand you something designed to hurt you.
People struggle. People struggle with that. I mean, I think it's the same. Someone tries to hand you something. We're conditioned. I'm supposed to take it, right? So I think that is another phrase you hear me say a lot in trainings, and when I speak on stage about what we do, is we protect us, right? Like we're within our community, we protect one another. And one of the ways we can do that is by reminding each other, like, there is a difference between somebody asking for money on the street, where that's a kind person trying to meet their needs, and you can acknowledge them as a human, whether you can meet that need or not, and somebody who is deliberately bringing hate to an event that you have designed to celebrate who you are. So yes, sometimes it just takes a reminder from the outside of, you don't have to play by the rules you've been taught. What he's offering you isn't a requirement. And a lot of times I see, and I'm sure AT has seen this, I just see a lot of relief on people's faces. I just see a lot of, like, in that way that part of us feel like we have to engage because we're conditioned to feel like we have to engage. It helps to have permission not to engage, right? Just have somebody out there saying, like, oh, you don't have to do that. And then you see people realize, right, I don't have to do that. And it's empowering. It is. Sometimes I think when I'm training people, it can feel hard at first for them to hear, like, we're not going to engage, because everybody, we're mad. We are upset with people who bring hate to these events. We want to engage and let them know that that's not okay. And what I often tell people is until you've done it, until you've made somebody invisible by not engaging with them, you don't recognize the power in that. And when you have done it, you recognize that we actually hold our power and maintain our power when we don't relinquish it to somebody else for their entertainment. So at first, it's counterintuitive because people want to take action, they want to do something.
Yeah.
And what they may or may not realize is that refusing to engage with hate is doing something, and it's modeling something really important for the people around you. And it feels much more powerful than people realize it's going to feel. When we circle up at the end and we check in, when somebody's done that for the first time, what I always hear is like, I'm so surprised, like how grounding that felt, how powerful that felt. You know, I didn't think it would feel like that, but it did. And I love that about the work. I love that we can teach people like you can redesign what this looks like.
Well, what you're describing to someone of a certain age here is bringing up all sorts of images of the 60s civil rights movement and a very clear game plan. We're going to walk into this lunch counter. We're going to sit here, and they are going to say the most hateful things imaginable to you. They are going to dump a milkshake on your head. They're going to try to do this, and we do not resist.
Right.
And yeah, obviously it goes against the whole fight flight response of the human being.
And you know, the language you'll hear a lot at actions is don't take the bait, right? Like I'll remind people, because no matter how much we train, when you're in the moment, you need a reminder of like, let's not take the bait, like because they're going for you. They want you to take the bait, and they work really hard at it. And for a while, they'll escalate to try to get a reaction, and eventually they give up because you know they get tired of being ignored. But yeah, it is counterintuitive and super effective at the same time.
Well, let's talk about that training a little bit. How does how much training goes in before you're actually, I'm sure deployed is not the correct verb. Before you participate, let's say, in an event.
Our umbrellas are deployed, Claire. Well, when there's a new group, Allie will lead a Zoom and will be very detailed, and you know, there's a slide presentation, and they go through from A to Z of, you know, just as you can tell probably from conversation, Allie is very, very thorough and very detailed and very kind about the whole thing. So I feel even after a Zoom, some of our members, they get it. It feels real. We went out to the Berkshires in the spring, and we had folks meet us there, and we actually practiced in the field with our umbrellas, and we had, you know, people that hate people and, you know, actually practice that. So doing it physically and mentally, being prepared, and then after showing up to one action, we know who the newer folks are, so we give them some extra check-ins and keep an eye on them. And most of our folks feel very prepared when they're actually at an event. Anyone a little more, has a little more experience, I think in general will take care of the newer folks.
Where are these folks coming from? Are your volunteers from within the queer community or within the BIPOC community, or are these more like relatives of people in the communities who want to work to keep their son, daughter, grandson safe?
I feel like it's funny. You kind of describe, I'm like picturing individuals as you list those different identities. Yes. And like, yeah. we're all of those things. A lot of us are within the LGBTQIA plus community, but not all of us. Many of us are what we call queer or trans adjacent. Like, you know, they parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, you know, siblings of queer or trans people.
So they don't have the membership card yet. They don't know the handbook. Okay, no, that's good.
I keep telling them, I kind of feel like once you're in ROAR, you kind of get the membership card, right? Like if you're going to stand between MAGA and the queer people, you can have your card. You know, the one unifying piece of the people who show up for this work is that they are people who want to protect and care for LGBTQIA plus or BIPOC and or BIPOC communities. And something that I always want to emphasize, even though everybody in this conversation understands this, is, there's a lot of overlap in those communities, right? Like queerness and trans identities are not whiteness. So, I see LGBTQIA plus events and actions as BIPOC actions, and I see the opposite as well. If you're at a BIPOC action, their specific centered action, there are LGBTQIA plus and trans people there. So I'm looking at it from a place of like, who are the people who are experiencing marginalization and how can we support them? And the one unifying thing that brings the volunteers together is that they care about that also. And often, I've said this on stage a lot, maybe one thing that I struggle about in this work is that it has often impacted people who show up to do the work. So what that means is that, people who are already marginalized and impacted are now in the front lines and exposed to the hate directly. And so we talk about that, and we talk about self-care, and we talk about debrief. We do debrief when we have hard events, and we leave a lot of space for the impact that might have. And I really ask people, like, if any of this work is ever creating harm that can't be undone in a debrief or in community or with your support network, please take a break. Like, please don't harm yourself to do this work. But what I hear back is that people find it really empowering because we're not out there doing it alone. We're in community with one another, and there's solidarity in that. And there's a sense of, I've done something. I've protected my queer, trans, BIPOC siblings. I've made myself a part of a community that is about support and care. And so, we have our eyes on it. Like, in some ways, wouldn't it be great if it was a bunch of like cis, white, straight people creating this line so that all the people impacted could just enjoy the events? But, we protect us, and we know that, and that's always been true. And we've always been our strongest when we remember that. And so, geographically, we're from all of the communities that I mentioned that we're serving. And we even have, I think we have a couple people in Connecticut, we have a couple people out toward Worcester. It's an interesting group. And one of the things I've loved the most about this work is like seeing who has come together into it and how we've become this kind of like fun hodgepodge of people that may have never met outside of this group, but it's intergenerational, and it's we're learning from each other, and we're like new language will come out, and some 20-something-year-old volunteer will help me understand what it means, and I'll remind them of something back from the 90s that seems like a million years ago. I'm not remind them, I'll teach them about it. It's a really interesting community, and it's people who care, and it's people who show up. And these days, finding your people is a survival skill, right? So I think in some ways it's a really beautiful thing that people get brought into this, and they're like, oh, this is where my people are. These are the people I want to spend every weekend with in Pride season.
And if you're covering 4, possibly 5 counties in Massachusetts, that's a lot of events. How do you decide, here's what we're going to do this year?
You are not wrong that is a lot of events. I think when we saw you at Holyoke Pride the night before, we had done a drag story hour at the Holyoke Library. That day we had Pride in Holyoke. The day after we had Pride in Amherst. It's not unusual to have, 3 or 4 events in a week during Pride season. And that's a lot. We're not, our numbers are not so much that doesn't mean repeat work for everybody. So when it's something like Hampshire Pride, which we love because they do Pride early before everybody else is trying to do Pride. It was a lovely event, and we had more than 40 volunteers there because we had, nothing else going on that day, and it's the beginning of the season, and everybody has a lot of energy, and we're stretched more thin when we have 4 events in 3 days. But we are in a position where sometimes we can do 2 events on one day. Often we have to make hard choices. And so, for example, we have 3 communities that run Pride on the same day this year, and we have not yet figured out how we're going to navigate that because we can't be at all 3. It's going to come down to kind of looking at need, looking at where have we already been, where can we, where do we want to rotate? For example, Berkshire Pride and Franklin County Pride are on the same day. And so we did Berkshire Pride one year, and the next year we did Franklin County Pride. Springfield Pride is the same day. We may go to Springfield this year. We're going to evaluate need, see whether we have the people to do 2 on one day. And it also depends what kind of event it is. So if it's something centralized like a drag story hour, we don't always need as many people for that as we do at an event like Hampshire Pride, where we are running a vendor booth to spread information and bring in volunteers, and we're marching with the parade, and we're speaking on stage, and we're escorting drag performers to and from the stage all day, and we're running 2 stages because they had a drag stage and a regular stage. At an event like that, you just need more people. So we evaluate what the needs are, we evaluate what our capacity is, and then we have a leadership team. I should have mentioned that. AT is part of it. We have AT and 2 other operational leads and an administrative lead, and all of us get together and make decisions about where our priorities.
The folks running these prides, I think they need to go on a big Google Calendar and spread these prides out, because we want to be, like Ali said, it's hard to say no. We want to be at all these events, but yeah, it is hard to decide. But it's nice to work with a group of folks that we talk it out. Everyone is heard, our little leadership crew. And yeah, we just make it work with what we have.
I'm assuming that there's a degree of coordination with the groups running these prides.
Absolutely.
So that they know you're there and they know what to expect. And
we don't show up anywhere uninvited. So one of 2 things happens, one of 3 things. Either we've worked with people before and they're like, we want you to come back, here's our dates for next year. Or we haven't worked with people, but they've heard about us and they get put in touch and they say, can you please do this event? Or sometimes like a volunteer from within the group hears of an event, sees something advertised and says, do you want to reach out to these organizers and see if they want us there? It seems like the kind of thing where we might be helpful. And I will do that and initiate a conversation and say, would you like us to come? And that's actually how in our first year, one of the big events that we did was Small Town Pride, which is put together by the Rural Justice Network. And that year it was in North Brookfield. And we became aware of it because they had a lot of publicity going on, because they, I don't know if you remember this or if you were aware of it, but they had a situation where the town leadership tried to pull their permits when they found out there would be drag performers. And so the ACLU had gotten involved. It had made national news. And all of a sudden there was all this attention on it. And there was a lot of trolling about the event. And there was a lot of concern about who might show up. So that's an example where they didn't know who we were or what we do. I reached out to them and said, hey, this is who we are and what we do. And if you would like us to come, we would be happy to support your event. And they said, yes, please. And we brought people to that event. And now, we did that event that year, the second year, and then they just moved to Spencer last summer and we did their Small Town Pride in Spencer. That's an example where we just could kind of track that there might be a need for our presence and offered it. We would never show up uninvited or as like a surprise. We're not subtle, right? So like you want to make sure the organizers want you there because you attract a lot of attention. And if there's something where they feel like it's not the right thing for them, we totally respect that. Some of it is just communicating about like who we actually are and what we actually do. We're not security. If people feel they need security, they need a plan for that is separate from what we do. Although we do provide a sense of security because we're eyes and ears and a presence and we're at the entrance, but we're not going to escort somebody out the way that, a security person would. So just a lot of sort of community outreach and helping people understand what's available to them. And most places are really happy and grateful to have our presence. I'm thinking then we build relationships. So we've done several events for the people who organize Northampton Resists. And so now when they have an event, they just reach out, what dates are you available? Or, typically the same people, as people in the general public have this idea that there are dozens of organizers out there. And the reality is that it's the same 5 people doing it everywhere, right? So,
exactly.
So if we're going to be at Holyoke Pride, the people who are organizing Pride are also organizing Story Hour and will ask us to do that as well. And, that is true with Hampshire Pride. There's dozens of things going on with Hampshire Pride, and the organizer of that, Clay, will reach out and say, here's where we need you. Here's the kind of support we could use. It's a matter of figuring out what's needed and who to talk to about it.
That's a nice feeling to be part of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
of these events, and is that, you know, once the leaders, once the organizers know who you are and what you do, that it becomes sort of automatic. Well, let's make sure ROAR is included in the conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things we love is like sometimes there's overlap. Clay, who organizes Hampshire Pride, is a ROAR volunteer and has been since our very first action. I think Hampshire Pride was our third action in 2023 when we began. So they know like exactly what we do, and we can have that conversation about like what's most useful, Hampshire Pride brings a lot of drag performers, and supporting them and making sure they feel safe and have an entourage around them if necessary is like part of the conversation. So it's ideal when there's somebody who understands both sides of it. But in the same way, like now that I've helped with Rural Justice Network's organizing stuff for a few years, like last year when they moved locations, I just met one of their organizers at the new location so that we could look at it and think about where things were going to be and how to stage things and where they wanted us. It's very helpful when you get to be involved in the early organizing because you get to have a say in, what's going to make the day go most smoothly.
Are your services free of charge?
Yeah, no, this is all volunteer, and we don't charge anybody anything. We will, if there's a Pride event or an event where people are setting up booths, we'll take donations at the booth, but we're not charging anybody. And I would feel really uncomfortable charging people for our services because when you bring a sense of sort of safety and celebration and well-being, like how do you put a price tag on that?
And they're all of these organizations are running on less than a shoestring budget these days.
And a really big part of what I love about what we do is that it makes it easier to organize these events, right? Like, we need more Pride. We need more drag story hours. We need more rallies and vigils and, standouts. And if we can lift some of the barriers to that and make it a little bit easier for organizers to make it happen and not make it costly to have some extra support, then that's supporting what we're all looking for, which is that visibility and that community building that is one of the ways we protect us.
When I talked to you guys at Holyoke Pride, you were going by a different name.
Thank you for asking about that. We began our very first action in 2023. We were not any kind of organization. I was asked by a local library to support a drag queen story hour, where they were getting trolled. And I knew of a model I had seen where people were shielding people from hate with umbrellas. And I asked to be put in touch with the people who were organizing that model. And they said, sure, use the model. Like, here's what we do. And that was Parasol Patrol, which is a national organization. And we did that event that way. And I liked kind of the way it worked. And I liked using the umbrellas. And I felt like this is an effective strategy along with some other things that we brought to it. So for a while, we just used the model. And we weren't called anything. It was like super grassroots. I mean, that first event was 50 people who'd never worked together showing up and me being like, hey, let's make this work together. And it worked. And so then the next thing was an event at a school that was a book about trans families. And then the next thing was Hampshire Pride. And for quite a while, we did that. And then Parasol Patrol, at a certain point, I think, several months or a year in, said like we could be a chapter of National Parasol Patrol. So for about a year, we were the Massachusetts or the Western Massachusetts chapter of that organization. And then we decided that we really wanted to focus locally. We really wanted to keep focused on the sort of grassroots nature of what we do and what our community needs here in Western Mass. There were some places where we found ourselves out of alignment with the national organization. We really wanted to keep our focus on the work and what's needed out here in Western Mass. So we made the decision to pivot away from being a chapter of a national organization and to name ourselves ROAR, in keeping with the, what we'd been doing for 3 years, almost 3 years. And so with a lot of transparency and a lot of sort of confidence in who we are and what we do, we communicated with the group. And all we heard from the volunteers was, great, let's do it. Like, proud to be part of ROAR, because really what we were doing was always about grassroots local organizing. And we just found that it wasn't super helpful. It wasn't serving us to try to be under a national organization to do that. And being ROAR allows us a little bit more flexibility. It's really important to us to serve all members of our community. The focus with Parasol Patrol was really specifically on shielding children. And we really wanted to center the joy and the celebration and the welcome of the events, and not put, a huge amount of focus on the hate. When it's there, we handle it, but we're not there for it. And I think that the transition has felt really healthy. We ended up collaborating. We needed a fiscal sponsor because we're not a 501c3. And so we are in collaboration now as a program under the Queer Joy Collaborative, which is an awesome organization that runs choruses and other actions. And it had always been built into their plan to do mutual aid work. So we're kind of a mutual aid part of the Queer Joy Collaborative at this point, and loving that connection and loving supporting their events and that relationship building. And again, that's local, and we're focused locally in a way that feels really right. So we've been doing the same thing for 3 years in somewhat different ways with a little more flexibility now. ROAR also allows us to do some other kinds of organizing in the community when we want to, and doesn't tie us down to an organization that is many states away.
I'll just emphasize how great the transparency feels. We are all transparent, and it wasn't always that way when you're talking about a national group thousands of miles away. I mean, right from the leader group meetings, right to the members, like everything is just put out there. And like Ali used the word healthy, it feels healthy, and being able to do many more things than just shielding children we just shield anyone who needs that shielding.
Maybe 2 years ago, I had a group from Free Mom Hugs on the show, and that same sort of dynamic of being present at Pride events, providing a much needed and sometimes very emotionally tasking service, if that's the right word. But, people who have been missing that in their lives for quite some time. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities in terms of what you're describing.
The part that speaks to me the most is really about letting people know you have their back, letting people know they don't have to do hard things alone, letting people know there's no shame and there should not have to be fear in participating in events with the people who are part of your community. Like that to me feels restorative, and that feels protective and like mutual aid. And I think that in those ways, there's a ton of overlap with, people coming to give hugs or anything else, and being focused on that and focused on the work of that and the grassroots nature of that. To me, the parts of the work that matter are in that piece. I'm not trying to build a national organization, so my focus is not on things like fundraising or building a name or building a brand or putting stuff out in the media. It allows me to stay closer to the work and to the parts of the work that speak to me. And, as I said, this is like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of time. So you have to love what you're doing to be willing to show up for that. The people who volunteer with us give up the opportunity to just go and be a participant at Pride. They're working. I really respect and value and appreciate people who say, I'm willing to make my day more complicated to make other people's days easier. But what I recognize is that people will show up for that work if it feels good, if it feels aligned with who they are and what matters to them. And if they don't, there's a dozen easier ways to spend that day, right?
Speaking of that, what each of you individually, what brought you to this work? What made you decide I'm going to put myself on the line?
A quick little run back to the last question. I mean, we have stood out, and I don't even want to call it rain. I mean, it was buckets. I mean, and I'm talking when Ellie said, people give up their whole day. You're going to have 90-degree weather. You're going to have rain. You're going to have cold. But people show up with this happy face, and that does not matter. And that, that just speaks volumes to me also. People show up no matter what the conditions are. And the question you just asked, Claire, about what brought you. So I showed up at Hampshire Pride. I think it was 23, I believe. I heard Allie. I was waiting for a friend to sing with the Queer Joy group, and so I'm waiting for the chorus to come along, and I'm sort of half listening to Allie, and then I don't know a few of their words. All of a sudden, I am like riveted and listening to them. That sound, I love the community. I did not have a place in the community, all my life. So just hearing those words, just I don't know, they just did it for me. I can't tell you how much joy it brings to work with this group.
I've been an activist and organizer in a lot of different capacities throughout my life. And when I first got asked to help with that first event, it was like a confluence of all the things I care about, right? It was like, I have this core belief about protecting childhoods and protecting kids. And this was like, kids want to come to a drag story hour and we'd like it not to be scary and we'd like it to feel safe for them. And so that was one piece. I love libraries. Like I raised my kids in the library and I adore libraries. I think they're an essential part of our democracy. And I think that, so having the opportunity to support a library felt right. When you're an activist or an organizer, you have to constantly make decisions about where you put your time because there's no end in sight to the places that need you. And the places that I find I show up for, even when I'm tired, even when I have a dozen other things to do, the things that get my focused attention are places that feel like an opportunity to let people know that we can have one another's back and that we can support and hold lines for one another in the world in ways that matter. And so the part of this work that spoke to me initially was that, like, I love the message of you bring hate, we bring love. You try to intimidate people from having these events. We make it easier for them to have these events. The phrase that we were hearing a lot over the last, 10 years or so, it's been like love wins, right? I often think of that at events when we see the protesters leave, or when somebody stops giving people a hard time at an event, I always sort of have in my head, right, like love wins, not always quickly, not always immediately, but, our superpower within this organization is that we are people who are willing to be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable to hold a line between love and hate. It's uncomfortable to show up at an event and be the spectacle and be the like big attention grabbing thing. It's uncomfortable to hear some of the things that, people might have to say about us or to us. Many of us, through our own lived identities, have been uncomfortable in some way or another for most of our lives. We're sort of inoculated to that. We know how to do that, and we know how to not let it decide where we show up in the world. That's our superpower. And what we have noticed over the years is that the people who bring hate really don't want to be uncomfortable. Like, they would not be who they are if they were willing to be uncomfortable. So what we experience over and over is that, as AT mentioned, if it's 100 degrees out, if it's pouring rain out, if it's cold out, if they're outnumbered, if they feel, any number of kinds of discomfort, they don't last all that long because that's not who they are. So for me, there's a power in I am willing to outlast the uncomfortable to preserve these spaces.
And they're much more likely to get the response that they want shouting into the echo chamber that is social media, right? Yes. That if what you're describing is exactly true, because why would I, as a disruptor, want to go stand out in unpleasant weather conditions, right, when I can make that point and get all sorts of positive feedback by just spitting it into a tweet?
Right. And that's fine, because if they do that from their home, then we can choose not to log into that space, right? Like, I don't want them in an uninvited space, right? And I don't want them in a space where they're making people feel like it's hard to go to Pride or it's hard to go to Story Hour. But they get the kind of feedback they want in their echo chamber. And if they want to stay home in their jammies and do that, that works for me. I feel like, that's
I would be more accepting of them if they showed up at Pride events in their jammies, little footy jammies with the flap in the back. I would have much more sympathy for them.
Some of their t-shirts are pretty ugly, so I would endorse the pajama plan too. We don't get to decide where they show up, but we get to decide what it feels like to other people where they show up. Our role is simply to make it feel better to be at those events than it would otherwise. And I think whether there's hate there or not, and you know, I should mention, like, the vast majority of our events, there's not hate. Like, we're lucky about that. And we are still making it feel easier to run the event for the people who ran it, because they never know when the hate's going to be there. You know, look, if you're a librarian and you're choosing whether to have story hour, and you can have it be drag story hour and then have to think about trolling and all of those other things, or you can do something, you know, much more non-controversial. People are human, and they're often going to choose the path of least resistance. And we just kind of want to open that door and say, you know, it matters to kids to see their families reflected in the stories that they read. And it matters to people to get to participate in spaces where queer and gender nonconforming and drag queens and drag kings are centered. So even though this might feel a little harder, we can make it easier, and let's do it.
The first time that I encountered something like what you do was back in '98, after Matthew Shepard's murder. The Westboro Baptist Church. Oh, I'm sorry. Started showing up and vehemently protesting, and a group of, and this is captured beautifully in the Kaufman play, The Laramie Project, where a group of people sewed some angel wings on and stood between silently, and just that, you know, you had raging hatred on the one side and outrage at the atrocity that happened to Matthew on the other, and these people just stood between.
I think that's a really important part of the story, that, like, we're not doing anything new. We're engaging in age-old traditions about protecting one another by creating barriers or shields, by escorting. Like, look at people who have had to do that for, you know, reproductive justice, or for any number of other things. Moving people who are fighting for their civil rights into or out of court, moving people into or out of abortion clinics. The escorting and the shielding work is really, like, age-old work that people participate in different forms based on what's needed. And I love that piece of it. It's like, these roots go way back. We're part of a legacy. And I think that's really important to mention, so that it's clear that, like, no one organization has come up with this idea. It's just something we're all sort of seeing work and repeating.
Oh, okay. Now that's a question I didn't get to. Who is this who keeps joining us?
Oh, I apologize.
No.
This is Ella, and she, you know, behind every effective organizer, I believe, is a cat or a dog who's making it all okay at home.
Well, I'm recording this from my part-time job, but ordinarily I would have some of my cats climbing on.
You know, Ella sees a screen and figures this must be about her.
Well, Ella, you are welcome here. And as you introduce your cat, it occurs to me that we are an hour into this conversation, and I have yet to have you guys introduce yourselves. Man. So let me combine that with my last question, which is, how can people get in touch with you if they want to be part of this effort, or if they're an organization who would like Roar at their events?
If it's okay with you, I will email you a link. We have a link to an interest form that people can fill out, either if they want to be a volunteer or if they would like us to show up at an event. And that's the easiest way for people to reach us. So is it possible to just send you that? You can put in the
Absolutely.
That would be great. I'm Allie Wicks-Lim, and I am the founder and director of ROAR, which is Rainbow Organizing and Response.
I am AT Trial, and I am one of the leads of ROAR. Yeah, we welcome folks that, you know, if this sounds good to you, we welcome folks to join us.
If it's okay, I'll add one thing, which I say on stage a lot. Like, people are sometimes quick to say, like, oh, it's amazing what you all do, and I appreciate and love the appreciation. However, I really think it's important for people to understand that the only difference between somebody standing in the line with the umbrella and somebody watching somebody stand in the line with the umbrella is the decision to show up for that, right? So, like, all of us have the capacity to help. All of us have the capacity to show up and do the work. It's not It's not for everybody, like not everybody enjoys it and finds it fulfilling, but for the people who do, it makes a real difference in their lives as well. So we welcome that. We have people who have never done any kind of activism, and we have people who are lifelong activists standing shoulder to shoulder, and nobody can tell us apart when we're in line. And often we have people who say, like, oh, I don't know if I could do the line, but like I could help at the table, or I don't know if I'm going to like it, but I want to try it. And what we typically find is that it's habit forming. Like the more you do it, the more people you know who are doing it, the more it feels like a community, the more confident you feel doing it, the more you want to be a part of it. And I'll be honest, we have volunteers who we see maybe a couple times a season, and we have volunteers who we see at nearly everything we do. So it takes all kinds, and it's not, there's not like, it's volunteer. It's not like we're going to say you have to do this many or that many events. But often people who think that they're going to have limited time for it are suddenly available a lot more than they thought because it feels good.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies. Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
or ask Claire a question.
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.